Okay, so think about like the Sydney Opera House. Instantly recognizable, right? But have you ever thought about how a building can like completely revitalize an entire city? That's what we're going to be diving into today. The Bilbao effect.
Yeah, it's a really interesting example of how architecture and urban planning can have effects that go way beyond just the initial project itself.
We're taking a deep dive into this YouTube video from BHY Solutions. It breaks down this whole architectural concept of reframing, using the Guggenheim Bilbao as like a case study.
Yeah.
So get ready, because we're going to uncover how this building became a symbol of urban renewal and redefined what a museum could even be.
It was started back in the 1980s with Bilbao, Spain. They were facing a tough economic decline, and they really needed a solution, a way to boost the economy, attract tourism.
Okay, so they decided to build a museum. That makes sense. Seems like a pretty standard move.
It does. But what's interesting is they didn't just go with the typical museum design. They brought in Frank Gehry, this architect known for his bold and really unconventional style.
Okay, now this is where it gets interesting. So Gary saw this as an opportunity to totally reframe the problem.
Right.
He envisioned not just a museum, but like a work of art. That would become a symbol of Bilbao's rebirth.
His vision was to create this landmark so captivating that it would draw people in from all over the world.
Tell me about this design. What makes the Guggenheim Bilbao so unique and different from a traditional museum?
He completely broke the mold, using these curving organic forms and then covering the entire structure in reflective titanium cladding. Just imagine this building that seems to flow and move, almost like a sculpture.
Well, that's definitely not your typical box-shaped museum. I can see how that would turn heads. But how did this design actually achieve the city's goals? You know, attracting tourists, boosting the economy?
The Guggenheim Bilbao became an instant sensation. Its unique design made it a global icon, drawing in visitors who wanted to experience this architectural marvel.
So it worked. People were coming to see this incredible building. What about the economic impact? Did it actually revitalize the city?
Absolutely. The museum actually became a catalyst for a much wider urban regeneration. Think new businesses, increased tourism, a whole wave of job creation.
So sounds like the Bilbao effect was about so much more than just building a cool museum. It transformed the city's image and sparked this chain reaction of positive change.
And that's the key takeaway here. By reframing the problem, Gehry didn't just create a building. He created a symbol of transformation and a catalyst for Bilbao's future.
It's amazing how one building could have such a ripple effect. But let's dig a little deeper into the Bilbao effect itself. What exactly does it refer to?
Well, it's become a term for the potential of architecture and urban design to revitalize cities, not just visually, but economically and socially as well.
Yeah.
It's the idea that like a single well-designed structure could be like a catalyst for positive change.
So it's more than just a pretty facade. It's about a whole shift in how people perceive a city and the opportunities it offers.
Exactly. The Guggenheim Bilbao didn't just attract tourists, it attracted investment, spurred new businesses, created jobs. It revitalized the economy in a really tangible way.
That's incredible. But it's not just about the numbers, right? Did the project have a social impact as well? Did it change how the people of Bilbao felt about their city?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The Guggenheim gave the city a new sense of pride and identity. It put Bilbao on the global map, not as a fading industrial city, but as like this vibrant cultural destination.
It's almost like the building itself became a symbol of hope and optimism for the future.
That's a great way to put it. And it all goes back to design thinking, to considering the broader context and aiming for solutions that go beyond just the immediate problem.
So what are some like tangible outcomes of this approach? Are there specific examples of how the Bilbao effect played out in the city?
Well, for one, tourism skyrocketed. Before the Guggenheim, Bilbao received around 250,000 visitors annually. But in the first year after the museum opened, that number jumped to over 1.3 million.
Wow, that's a massive increase. What about the economic impact? Did that translate into real dollars for the city?
Absolutely. The Basque government invested heavily in the project, but they quickly saw a return on their investment. The museum generated millions in revenue, created thousands of jobs, and attracted businesses to the area.
It sounds like a textbook example of how investing in arts and culture can have a real economic benefit.
It certainly is. And it's not just about the direct revenue from the museum itself. The revitalization of the surrounding area led to increased property values, new businesses, and a boost to the overall economy.
So what can we learn from this? Are there lessons from the Bilbao effect that can be applied elsewhere?
This example encourages us to think differently about challenges. Instead of settling for conventional solutions, we should ask ourselves, how can we reframe this problem? What are the unexpected possibilities?
It's about looking beyond the obvious and embracing creative, even radical solutions.
Exactly. It's about seeing limitations as opportunities for innovation. What if instead of just fixing a pothole, we reimagine the entire street? What if instead of just building a new school, we redesigned the whole educational experience?
Those are some big reframes. But I see your point. It's about thinking bigger, bolder, and considering the long-term impact.
And that's precisely what the Bilbao effect demonstrates. It's a reminder that we have the power to shape our cities and communities in profound ways. We just need the vision and the willingness to reframe the challenges we face.
Speaking of reframing, our source material, this YouTube video, focuses specifically on the architectural aspects of this approach. It breaks down how Gehry used certain design elements to make the Guggenheim so impactful.
Right, and it's crucial to understand how those design choices help convey a message, a sense of transformation.
The video uses the term fluid to describe the design. It talks about how Gehry deliberately moved away from the rigid, angular forms that were so typical of industrial architecture.
And that's a powerful visual metaphor, isn't it? Moving away from the harsh lines of the past and embracing a more fluid, dynamic future.
It also talks about how the titanium cladding reflects the light, creating this ever-changing surface that interacts with its surroundings.
That's so symbolic of Bilbao itself, a city reflecting its past while embracing the future.
And it mentions how Gehry even considered the surrounding environment, the river, the bridges, making the building feel integrated into the urban fabric.
Exactly. It wasn't just a building plopped down in the city. It was designed to be a part of the city's identity.
So we've talked about the impact, the design, the concept of reframing. But what does this all mean for our listener? Why should they care about the Bilbao effect?
It's a call to action, an invitation to look at the challenges in our own lives and communities and ask, what if? What if we approach this differently? What if we dared to reframe the problem?
It's about realizing that we're not stuck with the way things are. We have the power to change, to innovate, to create something truly remarkable.
And who knows, maybe the next Bilbao effect will be sparked by one of our listeners.
That's a great thought. But before we get too carried away with reframing the world, let's bring it back to a personal level. Imagine this. You're tasked with revitalizing your own city or town. What would you reframe to create a similar impact? That's a fantastic challenge. It really gets you thinking about your own community and the potential for positive change. Where would you even begin?
I think the first step is to
Yeah.
identify those ingrained assumptions
Yeah.
that might be holding your community back. What are those things that people take for granted? That's just how it is kind of thing.
You mean an underutilized space, a forgotten landmark, or even just a negative perception that needs reframing?
Exactly. Think about the things that people have just written off or simply stopped noticing. Those could be your biggest opportunities.
It's like looking at your city with fresh eyes, like you're seeing it for the first time.
Precisely. And that's what the Bilbao effect really teaches us. Limitations can often be opportunities in disguise if we just change our perspective.
So how can our listeners start to apply this reframing mindset to their own lives and communities?
It starts by asking questions. Don't just accept things as they are. Ask why.
Yeah.
Challenge the status quo. And then ask, what if? What if we approach this problem differently? What if we saw this limitation as an advantage?
It's like turning a problem on its head and looking at it from a whole new angle.
Exactly. And that's where the real creativity comes in. Once you start questioning those assumptions, you open up a world of possibilities. You might be surprised at the solutions you come up with.
It's inspiring, isn't it? Seeing how a city like Bilbao embraced this unconventional approach and completely transformed itself. It shows that we all have the power to create real change in our own communities.
Absolutely. And it doesn't have to be on a grand scale. Even small changes can have a ripple effect. It could be as simple as starting a community garden, organizing a neighborhood cleanup, or just talking to your neighbors about what they'd like to see change.
It's about taking that first step, no matter how small it might seem.
Exactly. And who knows? Maybe your actions will inspire others to get involved and create a Bilbao effect of their own.
That's a great thought to end on. So to our listener, remember the power of reframing, challenge those assumptions, ask what if, and don't be afraid to think big. You never know what amazing things you might achieve.
And as always, keep exploring, keep learning, And keep diving deep